Right, Brexit, Boris Johnson, Jeremy Corbyn, and the UK Parliament. It's all a mess. As you've seen over the last few days, the Remain MPs have been trying their best to block Brexit. And a lot of people who are obviously following the news are getting quite concerned and worried about the current situation. Obviously, it's not ideal, but let's not panic. Everything's fine. Now, we're going to talk about the potential options and how to fix this, and how hopefully Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings and the Tory government are trying to find a way to fix it at the end of the video. But so keep watching and we'll talk about it towards the end. But let's do a quick recap of the last couple of days in Parliament. Obviously, the Remainer MPs in Parliament put forward an emergency motion a couple of days ago to take over the parliamentary timetable. They won that vote thanks to 21 Remainer Tory MPs who, after voting for that, they lost their whip and they're no longer Conservative MPs. And then obviously there was a vote following that yesterday to actually block Brexit, no deal Brexit. The bill basically forces the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, to go to Brussels and beg the EU to give us an extension. Now, there are a couple of issues with this, and we're going to talk about towards the end of the video and how this wouldn't really work for Remainers. But they won the vote, and obviously a lot of Brexiteers were quite worried because we almost had Brexit coming up towards the end of October, and what's going to happen now? But it's fine. What happened was Boris Johnson, after losing that vote, decided to ask for a general election, a snap election. And because we have a fixed-term parliament, you need 2/3 of the parliamentary MPs to actually vote yes. It's nothing to do with getting a majority of 2/3. Basically what happened was he got almost 300 people, MPs, voting in favour of Boris Johnson's election, and 56 voted against. But because the rest were basically, they decided to abstain, he didn't get his snap election. Now, why? The Labour Party didn't vote for it. Interesting. The same Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn who's been saying this for the past 2 years.
It's time instead we had a general election and the people could choose who their government should be.
The public do deserve an election.
And let the people have a real say and call a general election.
There has to be another opportunity for the people of this country to decide who they want to be in their government. I think we need a general election.
Call the election and let the people decide.
The only thing I'm concerned about is how soon the general election can come, and we'll take that fight all over the UK.
And bring about a general election so the people of this country can decide their future.
Yes, despite his best efforts, Jeremy Corbyn, who's been begging for an election, he decided not only to say no to a potential snap election so that he could become Prime Minister, but basically this is the first time in the history of British parliamentary history and politics that the opposition essentially decided to endorse and support the government by not voting against it. Jeremy Corbyn endorses the Conservative government. And quite rightly so, the press and media decided to brand him a chicken. Now, why did a chicken cross the road? To avoid a snap general election. It's been fascinating because ever since Boris Johnson became leader, Jeremy Corbyn initially said that Boris doesn't have a mandate because he was only elected by 100,000 Conservative members, not the country. And then he said that Boris Johnson also doesn't have a mandate because he hasn't done a Queen's speech. And when Boris Johnson initially said, fine, let's do a Queen's speech, but obviously we have to prorogue Parliament for a couple of days to do this, Corbyn said, uh-oh, that backfired. And now Boris has said, okay, if you want to give me a mandate, and not just from the Conservative members, let's do a proper election. Corbyn realised he's not doing too well in the polls, so it's a bit risky. But apart from Jeremy Corbyn and Labour, the rest of the Remainer MPs in Parliament who are basically making a move against democracy and ordinary people in the country, they're real bosses. We have people like Anna Soubry. Now, Anna Soubry, who defected from the Conservatives to Change UK and keeps jumping around, they keep changing their names. She says that she is a Remainer because she's a passionate campaigner for democracy. But when she defected from the Conservative Party, she said, well, I don't really want to do a by-election because it's not really necessary, because she knows she would lose. And yesterday when Boris Johnson asked for an election, snap election, she also said, it's not the right time for an election Why? Because she knows she's going to lose. The same applies to some Labour MPs like Jess Phillips, who completely lost her mind in the House of Commons yesterday.
It's just a shame that quite a lot of the people who are sat in front of me, who know what has happened over the last 2 days is wrong, are too cowardly to actually say to me in here, in public, what they're all saying in the tea rooms. You know what has happened over here. It's as if we were kicking out Harriet Harman. That is what it feels like. It is an abomination the way your party has behaved. Absolutely. You've all crowed and given sympathy to me about the problems that we have in the Labour Party, and you've just sat by silently while your colleagues have been marched out.
It's funny how until yesterday all these lefty socialists were branding and labelling these conservative politicians as basically evil and Bond villains, and now that they've been kicked out of the Tory party, apparently Labour MPs are now their best friends, and they are now defending them against Boris Johnson. But despite the fact that our current parliament is basically filled with politicians who don't respect democracy or ordinary people's decision, we have some who are now defenders of freedom. One is Nigel Evans.
Has my honourable friend ever heard so many people sitting opposite us for the last 2 years crying out for an early general election? The Prime Minister is now giving them that opportunity, and they're running scared. They're running scared not just from the Prime Minister, not just from the next general election, but they're running scared from the people of this country who in 2016 said they wanted to leave the European Union. And it's the people opposite denying them that opportunity to leave the EU. Doesn't he agree with me that if the British people get given this chance to have an early general election, that the Conservative Party will win that election?
Nigel Evans is absolutely right. Because all these other MPs are being completely ridiculous. But he's not the only one. We have another Conservative MP, Andrew Percy.
I have to ask the question as well, when did it become the case that people who campaigned for Remain get to tell people who voted Leave what it is they voted for? Yeah. When did it become acceptable for them to say, no, these Leave voters, who I don't fully understand because I was on the wrong side of the debate and on the wrong side of my constituents, they didn't vote for no deal. I received an email from a constituent of mine last night called Kirsty, and she posed this question to me. And she said, why do these people who got the referendum result wrong, were on the wrong side, get to say why I voted? She said, I know why I voted Leave, and I'm prepared to have a no deal. And she signed off saying, my name's, she said, Kirsty, under 40, and quite well educated. Because that's what we've been told, isn't it, throughout, that if you feel like you want a no deal, then obviously you're just a stupid this northerner. And people have seen this. They're sick of it. We are sick of it. So I will not support any amendment that allows a further extension for this, because I know what's going on here. Yeah. I know, and my constituents know what's going on. Play it long, play for time, say you respect the result. You have no intention of respecting the result. They haven't respected the result in March of this year. They didn't in April. They're not going to on October the 31st, and you can sure as damn tell it, Madam Speaker, they ain't going to on January the 31st either.
Yeah. And that's the whole problem. It's because all these Remainers are assuming that they know why we voted Leave. And they wanted to make decisions on our behalf. And because, we're thick, we're stupid, we don't know what to do. But this is not the best way of doing politics, because as we've said many, many times, politicians are not our bosses. We are their bosses. Now, the Labour Party, they've been trying to say that they have plans for Brexit. Yeah, apparently. We have Lisa Nandy, one of the Labour MPs, who went on talk radio with Mike Graham, who was debating and saying we have a plan and we have to stop basically no deal Brexit. And she eventually at some point said that we haven't voted for a withdrawal agreement. I don't know what we did 3 times, but okay.
Why don't you have an election, then you could be in charge of the government, and then you could do what you wanted?
Because if we have an election right now, we give Boris Johnson the power to set the date. And if he sets the date for after the 31st of October, we leave the EU with no deal and no arrangements at all.
Well, you say we haven't got a deal now.
Well, we've got a deal. Because
you just told me we didn't have a deal.
We haven't left the EU yet, so we've got a deal in that we're still technically
You just told me we haven't got a deal.
Of the European
you can't
Union.
even have a deal a minute ago and now not have a deal.
I think you're just trying to be difficult, to be honest.
I'm not. I'm just trying trying to get at the truth.
Nonsense.
I'm just trying to get at the truth.
We haven't left the EU
Right,
yet.
so do we have a deal?
So we haven't negotiated a deal.
You just said we had a
but
deal.
We're in the EU at the moment.
Yes.
If we leave on the 31st of October, we aren't. I don't really understand what's so difficult about this for you.
Well, it's not me that's
we're
difficult.
leaving the EU
I do
on the
my job
31st
every
of
day, right?
October.
You guys haven't done your job for 3 years.
Well, this is just complete nonsense because you're not doing your job now. You're pretending to the public that all we're doing in Parliament is running round
Well, that's what it looks
trying
like.
to stop a
And that's
deal.
what they say to me.
We're trying
Because
to agree a
I
deal.
talk to the
That
public
is the
every
purpose.
single day, and that's what they say to me. They're sick to death of politicians arguing over semantics, arguing over little niceties, and making excuses about why we cannot do what they asked you to do, which is to leave the Europe.
But now let's talk about the government's strategy and Boris Johnson, Dominic Cummings, and what might be going through their head. So obviously, as I said, the last couple of days it's been quite tough, a lot of ups and downs, and actually the rate of people watching Netflix and normal TV has gone down because the drama of Brexit and the UK Parliament is so interesting and dramatic that no one's actually watching Netflix anymore. But I know a lot of people have been panicking, people on the Brexit side, but people like Dominic Cummings are masters of playing 4D chess and things like this, and everything that's been happening this week in Parliament were not really unexpected. But it's been quite obvious that what the Labour Party were always supposed to be doing in terms of the emergency motion to try to stop no-deal Brexit, and obviously the numbers were there on their side. So all these Boris Johnson being defeated in Parliament were not really a shock defeat or anything unexpected. That was always going to be happening, and there are always options to fix it. Now, it went through the Commons, the no-deal Brexit being blocked, and last night they started debating it and filibustering it in the House of Lords, and we were all excited because there were like 100 amendments that were added to this bill so that we could filibuster it in the House of Lords and block it. But then at 1 a.m, half 1 a.m, basically we came up, apparently the government and the House of Lords came to some sort of agreement that we still don't know exactly. They stopped the filibustering. And so again, people panic saying what's been happening. Now, there are a lot of options and there are a lot of possibilities. There's still a route to get a general election. And having a general election is not only good for Brexit, but it's actually necessary now to get rid of the wrong type of politicians that we have in the House of Commons. People deserve to have a say. People deserve to hire and fire their politicians. And those that have been making a move against democracy and the will of people, they should go. So that's one way. And the only way Boris Johnson could get his snap election is either convincing Jeremy Corbyn by changing the date of the election, or he could basically do, because of fixed term parliament, he needs the 2/3 majority. But if he changes the bill and basically overrides the Fixed Term Parliament Act, he could just win that vote by majority of one, and go to the palace and ask the Queen to dissolve Parliament. But the second option, which is more realistic, is that this bill to block no-deal Brexit would go through obviously House of Lords, which will be at 5 p.m. on Friday. And but then the next stage is for the Prime Minister to go to the Queen and get the royal assent to make the bill official. Now, Boris Johnson could do two things. Because the bill says that the government has to go to Brussels and ask for an extension. Only ask, because it's still up to the EU and the European Council and all 27 countries to actually vote for it. Even if one country vetoes it, it's out. So either Boris Johnson could go to the EU and ask for a favour and say, could you guys veto this so that we could actually sort this out properly. But that's a bit difficult because we don't know what the European Union want to do. But the second option is that Boris Johnson could tell the Queen not to give royal assent. Boris Johnson could ignore Parliament. So let's not panic just yet. There are a lot of options that could be happening, and we're still winning. Everything is fine. And the biggest tool and advantage we have is actually Boris Johnson, because people on the left and Remainers haven't been taking him seriously. Kind of like what the Democrats have been doing in America with Donald Trump. Now, Boris Johnson has this very specific personality and mentality, which people who don't know him, they think he doesn't know what's happening, he doesn't know much, and he doesn't really have a plan. But this is a very, very basic tactic that historically a lot of leaders have done. And actually, Boris Johnson said this himself a couple of years ago.
Well, I certainly think that as a general tactic in life, if that's what you're driving at, it is often useful to give the slight impression that you are deliberately pretending not to know what is going on.
Yes, don't fall for someone who's just pretending to play the fool. So let's see how it goes. And over the next few days, obviously on this channel, every day at 6 p.m, apart from the weekend, we'll be covering this. So make sure to subscribe and click on the notification bell next to it so you get notified when a new video comes out. If you guys want to interact with me, if you want to follow me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, you could find my details down here. And if you want to support the channel, the Cabinet Club, you could become a member. The link is in the description. Check it out and see if you like it. And hopefully, let's see how tonight goes in Parliament. And as I said, Friday, 5 p.m, we'll find out about the blockage of the No Deal bill in the House of Lords. So we'll see how that goes. Then I'll have an update for you tomorrow night. Have a great evening. I'm Tousi, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.